I'm currently in the high school curriculum, so my rendition of Read It, Do It, Tell It, Play It is a little bit different than it would be in elementary school. I recently read the short story To Build a Fire with my small group ELA class, and I incorporated these same steps with my older kids. So it's a little bit different, but still the same steps. So for the Read It, I read everything aloud, and I have copies for them to follow along with. So I read with enthusiasm. I try to read it almost like we're in a theater and they're listening to a play or like an audiobook or something. We also pause frequently for comprehension checks and things of that nature, because my students are students with disabilities, and it is a small English class, so they really get that one-on-one attention with everything. But I do like to discuss, and like I said, I like to read it as theatrically as possible. For my Do It, I have my students look up pictures of the places that we're talking about, try to look up characters or cartoons or things like that that remind them of the main characters in our stories. So an example of this story is about a man in the Yukon with his wolf dog. So we looked up pictures of what the Yukon's like and seeing how desolate and cold it is. We looked up pictures of the kind of gear that people have to wear in extreme temperature and extreme weather, and we kind of put all of that into a PowerPoint. And my students researched this on their own and then presented it to the class, so we all got a good idea of the things that we were looking at and the things we were talking about in our reading. For the Tell It, I actually had my students, once we finished reading the whole text, I had my students watch an animated film. It was actually a critically acclaimed animated film of the story that we had just read. And then we talked about the differences and similarities, looking at breaking it down into what are the most important parts of the story that we see in both the text version and in the visual version. So they're telling it again, and then we're really breaking down what was important about the aspect of that text. And then lastly, for the Play It, I had the students. And again, it's different in high school because we're not actually physically playing. I'm sure all of my kids would, roll their eyes at me and not participate if I brought out accurate puppets or something like that. But I still want to make it fun. So what we did was, there's only two main characters in our story. There's a man and a dog. And I have my students rewrite the whole story in the perspective of either the man or the dog. And to make this a little more fun, we talked through it a lot, and I called it dog thoughts, because we wanted to make sure that everything that we were writing was in dog thoughts, because we were writing as the first person of this dog. But I also had the student, and they're not done yet, but they're coloring this outline, or really this picture frame that their story is then going to go into, so I can hang it up in my classroom. But in the decorations, I'm having this student specifically, think about the environment of the Yukon. We use the example of, we're in a very cold, wintry place. Would it make any sense if you drew a beach? Not really, because we're in the Yukon. We're not in the Caribbean or anything like that. So again, I know this is a little different from the regular format of using a children's book and actually physically, playing through everything. But I did try to bring in all of those elements just for an older age group. My students are all 17 to 19 years old. So we still got that play in. We got to color a little bit. We got to, look at everything in a different perspective, but also more on their age level. I think overall, my mini unit went very well. That's the other thing. We did this over several days rather than in one class period. So it was a mini unit about this short story. I think it went really well. I think the students enjoyed the story, and I think it was much better than me just sitting there and reading it to them.